Life in the 1970s was much simpler than it is today. We weren't constantly bombarded with technology that seems to engulf every person we encounter. Socializing meant going out for a night on the town or even having people over for a gathering. If you think back to the 1970s, there were some distinctive items that you would see in homes, and no one sees these things today. So sit back and let's reminisce together. Today, beadboard or shiplap is very popular for interior decorating, but in the 1970s it was all about wood paneling. It may cover one wall or it might cover the whole entire room. The paneling was often made from plywood or pressured fiberboard that was designed to look like real wood. It usually looked fake, but it went along nicely with the earthly feel that most 70s homes had. If the walls weren't lined with wood paneling, then you would probably see some funky wallpaper. There was an assortment of styles to choose from, but they were mainly sporting geometric shapes and bright contrasting colors. Textured walls were also something found in homes. They might have been flocked or foiled paper or possibly just textured plaster. But the texture and the colors used in the 70s usually made them irresistible to the touch. Once you figured out how you wanted the walls to look, it was time to move on to the floors. If there is one type of flooring that screams 70s more than any other, it would have to be wall-to-wall shag carpeting. This interior design trend was huge, and it was often found in eye-searing colors like bright orange. Not only was this a huge item to see in homes, it was also a huge item to maintain, from vacuuming to raking it just so it would look good. Kitchen and bathroom floors in the 70s had a distinctive style, and they were by no means plain. Linoleum was available in lots of bold patterns and colors. Most households loved them because they were durable and easy to clean up. Some of the patterns that could be seen during the time featured geometric shapes, while others took their inspiration from nature. Fireplaces were another staple of 70s homes. Usually they were made of rough rock or stones that would take up the whole wall. They really had that look that you would see in a hunting lodge or cabin, and they certainly made a statement. If you didn't see stone, then it was also common to see exposed brick. This could be around a fireplace or just a plain wall of it. It was almost like people wanted that warehouse feel where they were living. You might also see these brick walls with angled ceilings. In the 1970s, socializing with neighbors, family, and friends was very popular. Once the guests made it to the living room, then they probably had a seat on your floral sofa. These were also big, bright, and bold. They may have had daisies or sunflowers on them, and what says nature more than sitting in a field of flowers? If the couch wasn't their style, then they would probably pick the chair that was solid colored. It seemed like almost everyone had the harvest gold one, but yet you could also see avocado green or persimmon orange. And who could forget the round ottomans that were also in the same popular colors of the time? Beanbag chairs were very popular in the 70s. They could be seen in living rooms, family rooms, or basements. Once you got in them, you were there to stay because they were so comfy. But these lovable beanbag chairs certainly made a mess when they split open. TVs are a common sight in living rooms of today, but in the 1970s they were a staple in the decorating. They weren't flat and hung on the wall like today. These were basically wooden pieces of furniture that your living room was arranged around. Not only were these good for watching your favorite television shows, but they also had plenty of room on top for knickknacks and family photos. Speaking of televisions, TV trays were very popular. They were perfect for your home-cooked meal or TV dinner while you watched your favorite show. After all, you couldn't miss it. There were no VCRs or DVRs back then. Something else that you might see in living rooms were crocheted blankets. These were often made from scratchy wool, so they weren't the best for covering up while watching your favorite movie. Usually they could be found on the back of the couch or on the ottoman. Maybe your grandmother made these, or maybe mom picked up a new hobby during the winter while watching television. These crocheted blankets had all of the colors and the patterns of the time period which we loved. You can't hardly mention the 70s and not talk about macrame. This was not only in every home, but it was also all over the house. You could see these as potted plant holders or various other wall hangings, and especially owls. Pottery also seemed to be a staple in every home, and it really went along with the earthly theme that houses had. These may have been from someone in the house picking up a new hobby or from the rise of ceramic artists in the decade. It was not uncommon to see ceramic lamps, vases, and more. Fringe was all over the place in the 70s. It was on vests and it was even a hairstyle, but it could also be found in many homes. It may have adorned the top of a doorway, but it was also frequently found on the top of curtains or on the bottom of lampshades. Apparently, people in the 1970s just enjoyed cleaning more things. There are several things that could be found in rec rooms that were unique to the 1970s. Whether you want to call them pod chairs, egg chairs, ball chairs, or globe chairs, these seats were actually quite cozy. You may have even had one in your bedroom. Funky lights were usually somewhere to be found near these chairs. These weird little lamps with colored filaments that glowed lit up the room, and everyone thought they were cool. Without them, the room would have been much more gloomy than they already were. Chrome was on every car in the 1970s, but it also found its way into the home. Chrome accents could be found on kitchen chair legs, coffee tables, appliances, and even lamps. A little bit of shine was perfectly fine. Pyrex dishes are still available today, but they are really just plain and clear when compared to the 70s. Back then, you were proud to display your casserole dish or mixing bowl on the table. No kitchen seemed complete without the glass pendant lights that were above the table. These outrageously huge globes were super popular in the 1970s, and especially so if they were orange. Vinyl tablecloths were a must-have on kitchen and dining room tables. They made cleanup a breeze, and they really helped to protect the wood table that you had. Now these seem to be reserved for picnic tables outside. If you really wanted to impress while entertaining guests, then you brought out the fondue pots. Everyone thought these were the greatest until someone dropped the cheese in their lap or on the shag carpet. Hopefully, you just had them stay over the vinyl tablecloth. Long before we had Keurigs, people had massive coffee makers that made a whole pot of coffee, and these were in every kitchen. There were several different brands, but Mr. Coffee seemed to be one of the most popular ones. Care for another pot of coffee? If you were in a house with a second floor, then you probably had floating stairs. They looked a little dangerous, but they were certainly a focal point in the home designs of the 1970s. During the 1970s, rattan furniture found its way into the homes from the patio. If you didn't have a peacock chair in your living room, then I'm sure you knew someone who did. Phones in the 70s were meant to last, and they actually had some weight to them. They couldn't do what cell phones can do now, but they definitely served their purpose, which was for talking. Push-button phones became available in 1963, but since they were made to last, you probably still had rotary phones in your home. If you did have a push-button phone in the 70s, then you were certainly embracing the future. Alarm clocks were a necessary item to have in the 1970s, and people were starting to have fancy ones. Do you remember the alarm clocks that sported numbers that flipped? They made a cool clicking sound and came in the ever-popular fake wood veneer or some bright 70s colors. The kitchen appliances of today come in white, black, or stainless steel. But in the 70s we had different options like yellow or green. These appliances are long gone now, but probably not because they broke down. By the 80s, people just wanted these colors completely gone. Taking vacations in the 70s was a big deal, and many of these moments were captured on Super 8 film or placed on slides. Family or neighbors would then come over, and they would all gather around for the big show. You certainly don't see these projectors or screens anymore. Home stereos were also a common sight in living rooms. The receiver might have been placed on top of the television, or it might have had its own piece of furniture to hold it up, and the record player. Stereo cabinets were the preferred way to go because they could hold all of your records and the coveted 8 tracks. The speakers were often found on the floor on each side of the stereo cabinet or the television. Of course, the speakers and the components were often covered in the faux wood grain of the time. Since we just mentioned records and 8 tracks, let's talk about them. Vinyl records peaked in the 1970s when the concept albums like Eagle's Hotels California came out. The design covers of albums is something that seems to be a lost art. Surprisingly, records seem to be coming back, but one thing that doesn't seem to be coming back is 8 tracks. At the time, everyone wanted an 8-track player in the home and in the car. They were easy to stow away, but it was annoying how your song could be cut off as it went to the next track. Colonial furniture made a comeback in the 70s, and perhaps this was due to the bicentennial. Regardless, many homes had these pieces of furniture adorning their living rooms, bedrooms, and other areas. I hope you enjoyed this little walk through the 1970s. The decade had a style of its own, and it really was a great decade to experience. What are some of the things that you remember in your home? As always, thank you so much for watching.